Yo, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back. I am here to do a live stream on the breaking news that we had today. That was with Trajan Langdon officially inking that contract to become your new president of basketball operations for your Detroit basketball Pistons, and the firing of Troy Weaver, which I myself find it pretty surprising for him to be just booted out that quickly. Which goes into the conversation that I want to talk about today, which is what are the Pistons' direction now that they've gotten rid of Troy Weaver and they've put in Trajan Langdon as the president of basketball operations. Now, with that all being said, Trajan has got a lot of. I can hear myself echo. Anyway, Trajan's got a Trajan's got a lot on his plate this coming summer. Still hearing myself echo. Put that down. All right. Trajan's got a lot on his plate this coming summer. It's going to be a real issue with everything that's coming up. I believe because of there's so many things that the Pistons have got to do this summer, unless they plan on keeping Monte Williams going into the next season, which is something I was not expecting. Now, I will say this. I will say that. I will say the main thing is that I thought what the Pistons would do would be to ditch Monte Williams first, because I mean, from everything that was being talked about prior to Trajan being hired, is that Monte Williams was on his way out, and I mean they're openly discussing his contract. They're openly discussing if there's going to be a buyout. They're openly discuss. Even Tom Gores has even said he doesn't mind paying the money to get Monte Williams out of here. So there's several factors that are being played involved here for me to think that any minute now Monte Williams could not be here. So with all that being said, it does come as a shock to see Monte Williams not being the one that got the boot today. Not saying that he won't get the boot come Monday, but it does shock me to see that it was Troy Weaver that got the boot today, and they're moving forward without them. The reason why it comes as a shock is because literally it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, I made a comment and I was debating people with inside the group, and if you haven't joined the group, it should be inside the description. With that being said, it does come as a shock to me that Troy Weaver got the boot this quickly. And I've been debating this all day. People have been telling me I've been defending Troy. Why am I so defensive about Troy? This, that, and the third. It's not me being defensive about Troy. It's me trying to make sure that the Pistons do this clean of house in a way that makes sense. And in my honest opinion, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to just dump Troy this quickly, especially with the NBA draft, like 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks away. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. People tell me, well, hey, well, Troy Weaver is not going to be the one making the with Troy Weaver gone, he's not going to be the one making the decisions now. So it's just better off for him to just not make any decisions and leave that to the guys coming in. The problem is the guys coming in are coming into a draft, I wouldn't say completely blind. I know I've been using that a lot, but they're not coming into a draft, to the part of the draft where they're going to be directly familiar with. They're all New Orleans Pelicans, basically. In New Orleans Pelicans, prior to being with the Pistons, Trajan Langdon, for example, were not scouting for this early in the draft. They're scouting for the mid to late range of the draft. Why would they be looking at players that are going to be top 5 picks when they're picking 15 through 30? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I wouldn't necessarily say they're coming in blind, but they're coming into they're going to be coming into this draft not really having the full picture of what's out there. Unless they really start snapping on it and get to the scouting reports. So, with that said, with Trajan Langdon coming in this late, finally inked his contract this afternoon with the Pistons. They're going to have to really get on the ball because the draft is right around the corner. The other thing that doesn't make a whole lot of sense is that if the plan isn't to keep Monte Williams and the plan is to ditch him like trash on the side of the road like they did Troy Weaver, that's a coaching search. So not only do you have to find your new GM, which it sounds like they already got someone lined up for the job, which kind of concerns me. But you also have to go through a coaching search, a GM search, if they don't have anybody lined up. And then you have to take on the draft. So the Pistons, in my opinion, Trajan Langdon, have a lot to do today. Or they have a lot to do this coming summer. So that raises a lot of issues. It also raises a lot of concerns if they're going to be. It raises a lot of issues if they're going to be able to squeeze all this in one summer, and then 2, it raises some issues if they're actually bringing in people that are qualified for these jobs. That's not a knock on Trajan, by the way. I'm not saying anything bad about that. I'm saying that if they have someone lined up for this GM role, was he vetted? Was he interviewed? Was he scouted? Or is this just another guy that they're just throwing in there? Same with the coaching position. If they just fire Monte come Monday, are they actually going to have interviews? Are they going to actually do any scouting on any coaches? Or do they just have some dude just coming in to coach? I don't know if that makes any sense. It doesn't seem like it makes a whole lot of sense. So for everybody saying that I'm defending Troy and I'm the person that's still going to bat for Troy, let me make one thing clear, is that I've never really went to bat ever for Troy. Even when he first got here, I was skeptical because he came in here as just as a scout, a lead scouter, vice president of a general manager or something when he was with OKC Thunder, and I wasn't necessarily sure if that was qualified him to be our general manager moving forward, even with everybody hyping him up the same way people are hyping Trajan Langdon up. So with all that being said, I just want to kind of go through some key points here. I want to talk about some of the stuff that Troy Weaver has done during his time as a general manager. You have an assortment of different things that he's done here. I'd say some of the bigger moves that he made. I would say all come in his first couple years as the general manager for the Detroit Pistons. You have him drafting guys like Killian Hayes. Oh, and by the way, this is one thing that going through Troy Weaver's draft selection, it is kind of crazy that he's not credited for a lot of the draft picks that most people thought he was making. They're actually credited to their original teams, and then Troy Weaver, quote unquote, traded for them, which is funny because I remember on draft night, these guys were Detroit Pistons on draft night. And I guess a good example of that would be, let me see. So on draft night, which was November the 18th, you have guys like Sadiq Bey, who are actually not officially acquired by the Pistons until the next day on the 19th. Which means the Pistons never technically really drafted him. And then same with, there's one more guy here. Where is he at? Isaiah Stewart. He wasn't officially acquired by the Pistons until November 24th. When he was traded from Houston. So it is interesting to see things like that. Because I wouldn't say my memory is the greatest, but I do remember Isaiah Stewart being a Detroit Piston on draft night. So, I don't know. I just thought I'd point that out because I found that interesting that officially he wasn't a Piston until like 4 days later, which is nearly a week. So, it's interesting. 6 days later, which is a week. All right. So, just kind of going through what he's done, Troy Weaver, as a GM as the Detroit Pistons, of the Detroit Pistons. A lot of the things that he's done were within the first couple years. And then when you start going through it, you start getting into the 2023, which was last season, and then going into this season, it's really... I honestly see the complaints that the fan base has with him, because it's a whole lot of just nothing. Just nothing. No real big trades. All the trades he's done is to feel like lateral moves. The bigger trades that he's made, for example, was like Jeremy Grant. And that was like in his first... That was on draft night. No, that was not draft night. I'm sorry. That's Christian Wood that I'm mixing him up with. But Christian Wood would be a good example of him making a good trade on draft night for Isaiah Stewart. And we even got Trevor Ariza for that, out of that as well. But then you have, speaking of Jeremy Grant, that trade was made. Let's see. It wasn't made draft night, obviously. That was made a couple years later. Let me see. I'm trying to find it here. Let's see. Jeremy Grant. Where are you, buddy? There we go. Jeremy Grant was made 2 years later, and he was traded for Gabriel Procida, and we also got a 2025 first rounder out of that from the Portland Trailblazers, and a second rounder of 2025, which is next summer, and 2026 second rounder. So he got several draft picks for Jeremy Grant, and that's really his last real big trade. It's the reason why I'm bringing it up, because I'm trying to look at his and then he traded for Bogdanovich 2 months later for Saban Lee and Kelly Olynyk, which was a pretty good trade. I'd say that's a pretty good trade. So he's so that's 2022. So I'd say some of the big moves that he's made were through 2020. Let's see, 2021. Trading Mahulik. I never can pronounce his name right. I always just said Steve Mahulik for Diallo was a pretty good trade. We got some decent years out of Diallo while he lasted, and then that's pretty much it for 2021. Yeah. That's pretty much it for 2021, and then he made free agent signings. So, yeah, made Corey Joseph was the only real notable free agent signing he made. Yeah, I can see the anger why Pistons fans are really not happy with Troy Weaver. Because in 2021, it's really just nothing. It's just he signed a bunch of role players. Nobody too crazy. His biggest signing that summer was Corey Joseph, who actually seen meaningful minutes, and then the rookies. And then he traded. He traded Mason Plumlee and JT Thor to Charlotte for Balza. But he didn't really get any talent. So he didn't really get any talent back for Mason Plumlee, who was doing a decent job for the 2 years that he was here, and he really didn't flip him for anything. He just got a project player for Mason Plumlee. That's on the negative. So when people say he didn't really build a roster, I guess you can't really blame him for saying that, because here in 2021 it's just nothing. It's really nothing, and if anything, he traded away talent just for projects. Yeah, no, I get it. I can see it. I get it. So 2020 made some decent moves. 2021 not really making anything special. And then let's go to 2022 now. We already touched on it a bit with Jeremy Grant. Let's see, what do we get here? Let's see, 4-team trade. Let's see. So he traded. So this was a decent trade for Marvin Bagley. We traded Josh Jackson and Trey Lyles. And who else did we get? What really makes this trade kind of sour is that we gave away several second-round draft picks to only get Marvin Bagley back in return. And that was that's still kind of considered the 2021 season though. Because that's actually early 2022. So it's still technically the same season. And that was a desperation because he didn't really do anything in the summer of 2021, as we touched on. So we're going to fast forward more to the end of 2020, the 2021-2022 season here. And again, just signing role players, draft Straden Ivey. And now here's the trade for Jeremy Grant. We traded him for a 2025 first rounder from Portland. So that's something to look forward to next season, is that first round pick. Since the Portland Trailblazers are rebuilding. So that's something to look forward to. I think, this is kind of goes back to what I was saying about Mason Plumlee and him trading him away for project players. That's kind of what he did with Gabriel Procida. I believe I'm saying his last name right. And a 2025 first round pick, which is good, and he got a couple more second rounders for Jeremy Grant, but he didn't really get any players back for Jeremy Grant. So when people are looking at our roster and saying, man, why don't we have any players? Why are half our players G Leaguers? It's because of trades like this, trades like Mason Plumlee, trades like Jeremy Grant. Didn't really get much back for these guys. He did. That 2025 first rounder could be something good next year. So, and that's if he didn't trade it away. I haven't looked. I don't think he did, though. Let me see. Just kind of skimming through it. I think we still have that. So that 2025 could be something good, but it really doesn't benefit the Pistons last year or the year before when we made these trades. He basically banked a first rounder for our future. So it's depending on how you look at it, it's a decent trade. Just wish we would have got a player back for him. Just something, right? So if anybody just joining, basically we're just reviewing what Troy Weaver has done in the last 4 years he's been here. And the one argument that I make for Troy Weaver is that I do appreciate him not spending any money. Most people be like, what? Not spending money? Yeah, I'd rather him not spend any money than be like Stan Van Gundy and just spend everything to the point where we are handicapped to the point where we can't do anything. You know? We got like the 10th highest salary cap for a team that can't even make the playoffs. Yeah, no, I'm good. And then they're like, well, he didn't know what he was doing, so what is the common retort? He didn't know what he was doing. That's why he didn't spend any money. Good. Good. That's good. That's good. I'd rather him not know what he's doing and spend money. Like Stan Van Gundy, okay? Like, I'd rather that than Stan Van Gundy. At least he's not making anything that's going to hamper this organization for like 6 years down the road. Thank God. So, you want to argue he doesn't know what he's doing? Fine. But for someone that didn't know what he was doing, he made a smart decision by not doing anything with it. Just, okay, I'm just going to leave it put. Good. If you don't know how to spend it, don't spend it. So I do appreciate that. Let's see. Marvin Bagley signed Marvin Bagley to several years. We also drafted Duran in 2022. Again, a lot of his free agent signings, a lot of role players through every single year he was here. It's kind of going back to what I was saying about not spending a ton of money on any free agents, because that's the knee-jerk reaction most people want to do. Most people want to just spend whatever it takes to get the next Charlie Villanueva and Ben Gordon, and it's like, bruh, we've been down this path before, man. Remember that, or is this something that's new to you? Some C-tier star player and just spend away, and it's like, I got a funny feeling this one's gonna stab us in the back. But I think, honestly, I'm not too angry about the players he signed through free agency. It's just a bunch of role players, which I'm fine with. The problem is that if you're going to put a competitive team on the floor, you got to make the right draft picks, one, which I think he was so-so. But then you got to also develop those draft picks, which he didn't have a plan in place at all, and still doesn't. Which I'm curious on what Trajan will do when he's here, and what kind of plan he has for our prospects moving forward, the ones that are still left, Jaden Ivey, Duran, and seeing if they're actually going to get development or they're going to get shipped out of town. The other thing too, and again touched on it already, is that his trades. He just made lateral trades or kind of traded back and didn't really get much back for certain players, which is a bit annoying. So these are all the things that make this roster currently that we have, or that we've seen last year and the year before, very depleted, is because of things like that. And because at that point, you're banking on your draft picks to carry your team. And that's not going to work if your draft picks are, one, slow developing, or two, they don't develop at all. And that's kind of what we've been seeing over the last 3 years, 4 years. So fast forwarding to the end of the summer of 2022, he traded Saban Lee, Kelly Olynyk for Bojan, which I think was a great trade. That one's a good trade. But the problem is he needed more of that. And he didn't really get it, honestly. And that happened 2 years into his tenure here. It's not going to cut it. That kind of trade is something I would have loved to see, like 3 or 4 more of those kind of trades, and you just don't get it. So you do get a depleted roster, and then on top of that, Bojan had a ton of injury issues throughout his time here. Half the time he didn't play, so you just traded 2 players away for a guy that gave you decent production when he was playing, but when he wasn't, he was gone for long stretches. He's signing role players here in 2022. Let's see. February 2023, he has a 4-team trade here. Who is this? This was Saddiq Bey. Let's see. Saddiq Bey is one of those. See, we got James Wiseman out of it. lateral move. It would have been nice to get 2 players for Sadiq Bey. It doesn't look like we got. Let me see. We actually traded Kevin Knox and Sadiq Bey. It's hard breaking apart like 4-team deals, especially when it's written like this, because it doesn't just segment exactly what the Pistons got back and exactly what they traded away. It's like in a huge paragraph of just like 30 different players bouncing back and forth. But it looks like we traded maybe a second rounder in here from us in there, but yeah, it's a lateral move. I mean, Sadiq Bey, Kevin Knox for James Wiseman. We actually traded 2 players away for James Wiseman. I would like to see it the other way around, where we traded Sadiq Bey for 2 players. But yeah, I mean, just goes back to the whole depleted roster. And James Wiseman was all right. Not a needle mover. So fast forwarding to 2023, because he's just signing free. He's just signing role player free agents through 2023. Let's see. Drafted a Sur with the 5th pick. Let's see. Also signed Marcus Sasser. Okay. Okay. And then here, so fast forwarding to 2023, he has another trade. That's a Joe Harris trade. A lot of people bring that up. A lot of people are angry about Joe Harris. Personally, not too angry about that because he was on an expiring contract. But it was to meet the salary cap expectations for that year. Nothing that I personally don't. Let's see. To Brooklyn for a cash second rounder. Got a second rounder out of that Joe Harris trade, it looks like. 2 second rounders. Okay, moving on. Marvin Bagley, Isaiah Livers, a second round pick for 2025 and 2026 to Washington for Gallinari and Mike Muscala. God, it sucks that Mike Muscala left, right? He was a solid player during the games that he was with the Pistons. He just didn't want to be here. Now that would have been a nice upside to get a guy like Mike Muscala, but you need like more of those guys. Like you need like it'd have been nice to have, and then not only that, but you traded like 2 second rounders. But well, does it really matter? You got like 30 of them. But Marvin Bagley and Isaiah Livers for Mike Muscala. You need more of Mike Muscala's in that trade. Like you need to figure out how you can get like 2 or 3 more of those out of Washington in a trade like that. But Mike Muscala left. Gallinari, I don't even think did he see the floor much? Like these guys here, you just traded 2 players away and really didn't get much back. You got Mike Muscala for a few games before he requested a trade. Did he get a trade? Let me see. Hold on a second. Let me just look. Traded Kevin Knox and Procida for Simone. That's a good trade. We like Simone. So more trades like that. The one to Utah in February 8th of this year, 2024. Need more trades like that. Had to give away a second round pick as well to Utah for him, but that's a good trade. Needed more of that from Troy. Unfortunately, trades like that have been few and far between from him. So Troy really struggled there. And then let's see, traded. Okay. And then here's the Bojan trade. Got Mikel Flynn. He had quite a game. Evan Fournier, Quentin Grimes. That's an okay trade, especially with Bojan not really be able to do much the last few years he was here. So that's an okay trade. And then, let's see. And then according to Basketball Reference, his last transaction was that he signed Jalen Noel to a 10-day contract on April 3rd, which just kind of goes more in the way of everything that he's done. Mostly everything he's done is just sign a bunch of role players to small contracts. So just looking through his transaction history, you can piece together where the wheels fell off for this team easily. It's the fact he doesn't have a good upsides on any of the trades he's made. And then some of the upsides that he has are not going to pay out until maybe next year, for example, with the Jeremy Grant trade. And the rest of the the rest of the trades that he has, he's actually given away more players just for second round picks, players that are on and off the injury list, guys that are they're not really moving the needle, making lateral moves, and then also giving away a bench player with it. So his trades, he really failed, in my opinion, in the trade department. He's got to get something back. And he didn't really... him flipping trades was not his specialty. Now, I bashed on Stan Van Gundy a little bit earlier, but he's a guy that was hit or miss on his trades. But the trades that he hit on, he really did hit on. So that's one thing I'll give Stan some credit for, is that he was able to flip some nasty trades. Not every trade. He was very hit or miss, but he was able to flip some nasty trades. One trade that's always going to be seared in the back of my brain because of what we got out of it. He traded a second rounder, and this is off the top of my head. I'm not looking it up. He traded a second rounder for Marcus Morris, for Reggie Bullock, and Danny Granger. Now, at the time of that trade, Reggie Bullock was a complete nobody. Marcus Morris was considered the worst Morris brother. Markieff Morris at the time, which is crazy how things change over time, but Markieff Morris was considered the star player, and Marcus Morris was considered the rejected player that nobody wanted on their team. So he was sitting at the end of Phoenix's bench. And it was like Danny Granger, I want to say it was Danny Granger, that was kind of considered the better piece, and everybody's just like shrugging their shoulders like, what is going on here, right? Marcus Morris ends up being a solid starter during his time as a Piston, and then moving on to the Knicks. Reggie Bullock became a solid player. And then it was actually Danny Granger. I keep on saying Danny Granger. I'm not sure it was him or not. Ended up being cut some short time after that. But that's the kind of trades that the Pistons really need to be making throughout this entire time that Troy Weaver has been here. And you don't see anything like that. I mean, I'm not saying that it's like it's a regular everyday thing to trade a second rounder for 3 NBA players. But you like to like really dig down on someone's roster and figure out who's not being utilized properly, and then bringing them here for a new role and try to see what you can get out of them. Those are the kind of trades that you would like to see Troy Weaver make, especially for a team that doesn't have a whole lot to give up besides project players and second rounders. It'd be nice to see more of those. And he doesn't really do any of that. He's basically, what he's doing is he's trading away established players for draft picks and somewhat established players. So it's the reason for the depleted roster over the last few years. Now, let's see. So let's see what I got here. What do I got here? I just want to check my comments really quick. I got I think it's Gianni. He says it's time for a change. I don't disagree with that. Let's see. Let me see. What else do I got here? All right. So the next thing I want to talk about here is I want to talk about something I said about Troy Weaver and my issues with him for the draft. It isn't necessarily he screwed up picking, but it's the fact that that's a draft where we needed players to be long-term fixtures on the team, and this is concerning the 2020 draft. This is just me taking a retrospective on what was the problem with the 2020 draft. It's not necessarily the players he picked, it's what he's done with those players and those assets. As mentioned in the previous video, those draft picks that you pick, you're getting essentially a free player that you didn't have to swap for. You just acquired them because every team gets 2 free players, one first rounder, 1 second rounder. You didn't need to swap anything for them. You just get them. And it's what you do with them that are going to make or break you. And it's kind of me discussing that in this little paragraph. It's like everyone in that draft would be going into their 5th year this coming year. They would be veterans today because this was a weak draft. Similar to this year's draft, you'll get glue guys and long-term role players, but you decide to trade into the draft to pick more players in a weak draft. Now, credit to him, he was able to pull solid players late in the first round with Sadiq Bey and Isaiah Stewart. But what has he done with those players since? He had to cut Killian, who was your 7th pick in that draft. He turned Sadiq into James Wiseman, who was also part of the same draft. He's had some decent games here and there, but nothing that's really special concerning James Wiseman. Also, he's a restricted free agent this offseason. Maybe he comes back next year. I don't know. We may not sign him. With the roster the way it is, with it actually not having a whole lot of NBA talent on it, he's probably going to be coming back, but for a contract that's not really all that much. Last summer, he locked up Isaiah Stewart to a $60 million contract for 4 years, who is a limited big and is also on the fritz. And who knows if Wiseman is coming back. We could let him walk in free agency. Even if we retained him, he's not going to net us so much in a trade unless he vastly improves. Right now, 2 out of the 3 first-round picks in that draft have been duds. We haven't got much back, and we haven't gotten much back. And we're hoping Stu can keep on improving and or net us something in a trade. So if Isaiah Stewart doesn't keep on improving, it can be easily a 3 out of 3 in that draft of first rounders that didn't amount to anything. And I'm not one of those dudes that's going to be like, oh, we missed on Halliburton in that draft, or in the draft with Devin Booker, we missed out on him. I mean, in my opinion, those are reaches. If these guys were not being discussed during our even right now, we're talking about pre-draft selections the Pistons could take. Right now, in the fan base and all across the internet, no matter what podcast you listen to that talks about the NBA draft, everybody has draft selections that they have lined up, and it's usually the same 3 or 4 names every draft. It doesn't shift much between each person. Everybody agrees that these are the 3 or 4 names that we can draft. Halliburton and Devin Booker and several other names that the Pistons get dinged for never came up as serious options going into those drafts. In my opinion, those are reaches. If they're not part of our pre-draft discussion in any type of way, any serious type of way, why are you getting ass hurt about it? And that's especially the case for them too. So basically I don't get bent out of shape about missing out on Halliburton, because he was never really part of the discussion anyway. It's more so I'm getting bent out of shape about Killian Hayes, because we should have done something with him. Am I saying that we should have done something with him as in like he'd have become a star player if we did something right? Maybe. It's more so we had to cut him. He was once the 7th pick of the first round. We couldn't do anything with that, and in 4 years we cut him. It's absolutely asinine. It's ridiculous. What I'm looking at is what are we going to do with players you selected, and looking at it from a 4-year perspective gives you an idea where we're headed with the organization. It's clear the guys that were picked in 2020, that there was no long-term plan for them. That is a huge issue. And that goes back to Killian Hayes, is that you drafted him and just let him flounder for 4 years. There's no long-term plan. It just feels like you're just picking to pick players. Oh, yeah, he's got a lot of potential. Or, yeah, he's got a lot of potential. He's performing well on the court. What is the long-term plan for this guy? And then we kept on picking... the other funny part about it is we kept on picking point guards. At what point do you say we got enough point guards on the roster? Again, just... it's ridiculous. So this is kind of like my issues with Troy Weaver. They go a lot deeper because people will point to... So the reason why I'm doing this little dissertation is because people will point to Troy Weaver and will be like, yeah, Troy Weaver, he didn't pick Halliburton. Troy Weaver, he's done this or that. And it's like, that's kind of surface level stuff, man. Let's dig a little deeper here. What was the plan for Killian Hayes? Was it just a pick to pick him? So, and I'm tearing apart Troy Weaver, and this is me. This is coming from someone that people say I've been defending him. In a certain way, yeah, I'm not necessarily. You're kind of forcing me to defend him because you're reaching on a lot of issues. There's a lot more other things here that we've had problems with Troy, and this not one of them. That's not one of them. This is one of them. So it's a huge issue, and now that's my problem, is that we traded into the draft to get those picks. And a lot of them haven't amounted to anything. So that goes back to, again, for us trading for assets, right? So that goes back to the whole trading for assets and not really getting much back. Is at first you got much back for getting second or getting first rounders, but in the end they didn't get anything else for them. You're not continuing to flip. You're just letting them expire. I don't know how else to say it. It's just you're letting assets die on the court. You're not getting anything back for them. So you trade into the draft to get those picks. And then on top of that, it was in a weak draft. Anyway, point is that I feel like a lot of the effort we put in that 2020 draft, we traded away assets to get those first rounders, and hardly any of them turned out to be much in a weak draft. With the 2021 draft and the 2022 draft, and even the 2023 draft were much stronger drafts than that 2020 draft. I wish we would have put that effort, and that's the most effort on that 2020 draft is the most effort Troy Weaver put into any draft, which is another knock on him as well, is that it seems like we just went into the lottery, accepted we would be the 5th pick, and just drafted. We didn't really make an effort to trade into those drafts the same way we did the 2020 draft, which is very weird to me. That's the part that I don't get about Troy Weaver, is how can you make this concerted effort to just... I mean, he really banged the door on that 2020 draft and selected picks. I wish he was that aggressive in the last several drafts. And he never was. He never was again. He just went into the draft lottery, got the pick for the 5th, and then drafted for the 5th. And then called it a day, and then signed up more G League players to the roster. And that was the summer. So these are my issues with Troy Weaver. For anybody accusing me of being someone that's a Troy Weaver fanboy, not even close. I have some serious issues with Troy Weaver. I just don't think he should have been fired immediately. I think that should have been designated for Monte Williams, honestly. But then it leads to the question if Monte Williams is going to be the guy, is going to be our coach moving forward. GM search, coaching search, NBA draft, all within 2 weeks. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Something's going to give. So, and by what I mean by something's going to give is that we're going to just do a hastily hiring of both a coach and a GM just to squeeze in time for the NBA draft, right? It just, the whole thing doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The timing of everything is just off. So that's basically my my rundown of Troy Weaver. Overall, what do I give Troy Weaver, man? I'd say a D. That's me being nice. Maybe a D plus in an overall grade that he was here. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna bump it up to a C minus. I'm bumping Troy Weaver up to a C minus, and the reason why is he's hovering between a D plus and a C minus, and the reason why is that he gave us a hell of a lot of spending money and didn't spend anything. And if you want to credit that to him to not knowing what he's doing, as I said earlier, great. Thank you. Thank you for not knowing what you're doing and had the wherewithal to say, this is something that I cannot deal with. Just, I'm going to leave it alone. Thank you. Thank you. So, I do appreciate that. And just for that, he gets, I'll bump him up a notch. C minus, D plus, somewhere around that area. Just for not spending any money stupidly. I do appreciate that. Because we've been in situations where GMs and president of basketball operations have spent money very stupidly and have got us into a terrible bind. I mean, he's basically set up our success perfectly for the next person. You got all kinds of spending money to play with. Troy Weaver, so much so that Troy Weaver didn't even have that coming into being on the Detroit Pistons. Think about that. He didn't come into a situation on the Detroit Pistons with any spending money. He had to create that. So all the money that's sitting there in our salary cap and not being used, he created himself. And he's lined it up for the next person to take over and use it. And I hope to God we spend it wisely. Because the minute... Here's another thing, too. The minute Troy Weaver was fired earlier today, and between the time he was fired, which was around 1 o'clock, to the time that it was announced that Trajan officially was hired in, which was around like 5 o'clock, 5 or 6 today, those rumors of Zach LaVine started popping up out of nowhere. I thought we were done with Zach LaVine. Nope. They started popping up like wildfire today. Makes you think who was in favor of bringing in Zach LaVine and who was stopping it from happening. I really hope the next person that takes over doesn't go on a Hollywood blonde shopping spree. You're going to regret it. Like we always do. It's not going to be pretty. Oh, man. It's not going to be pretty. Anyway. Not only that, but we're attached to another free agent looking to get like a $100 million contract. I can't remember off the top of my head, but all of a sudden these high tagged free agents start popping up on our radar, or high price trade targets start popping up on our radar randomly. It's weird. Of all days, today, the day Troy Weaver is fired and Trajan Langdon's brought in officially. I really hope the next person spends well, because it will be our Achilles heel, and not just for a season or two, like we did with Troy. but it's going to be a long-standing Achilles heel for 5 years, 4 years. Think Stan Van Gundy, man. God, we were in a handicapped situation since like 2016 all the way to 2020 when Troy Weaver came in and cleaned it all up. So keep that in mind. Let's see. Again, I will give Trajan the benefit of the doubt. I will not disparage him in any way, anything like that. I just hope that he's... I just hope he makes smart decisions. And I'm concerned about the draft coming up because we don't have a GM in play. He just got hired in today, officially. So everybody that he's bringing in from New Orleans, they haven't even stepped foot in yet. I doubt it. When is the NBA draft? The NBA draft is June 26th. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 3 weeks. Yeah, we're 3 weeks. So what I'm saying, what I'm trying to hint at is that what I was saying about the 2020 draft, we're going into the 2024 draft basically on our heels and definitely not prepared. And you fire the guy that's probably been scouting that draft since February. Who the top players are, who's rising and falling, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, I just hope in 2028, I'm not talking about the 2024 draft than I am about the 2020 draft. I really hope that's not the case. It'd bother me. All right. Little ditty here from James Edwards. He says, Pistons make the hiring of Trajan Langdon officially official. Here are some quotes from Trajan Langdon. And I'll pull some up. So, again, I'm not going to beat down on Trajan. He hasn't done a whole lot here yet. So I'm not going to crucify him or anything like that. I just have concerns. Is basically what I'm getting at. He says, I've committed to building a front office in Detroit that brings together the most advanced capabilities and creative basketball minds. This is from Gores. Trajan is an accomplished front office executive with an impressive track record. He's worked his way up and seen it all as a player, scout, and executive. He's been successful at every level, and I'm confident he will very swiftly get us to the standard of excellence I expect from every business, except for the Pistons. Standard of excellence. Tom Gores. I believe this is Trajan talking. He says, it's an honor for me to join the Detroit Pistons, and I'm excited for the opportunity. I've spent a considerable time with Tom over the past few weeks and am fully aligned with his expectations for the challenge ahead. The work starts immediately. I appreciate Tom giving me the opportunity to build on the foundation that has been laid and help this team compete at the highest level that has been laid. Okay. There's a great tradition in history associated with this franchise. Not recently. I'm excited to build on that for everyone associated with the organization and the passionate sports fans of Detroit. He's also noted that the Detroit's young talent, salary cap, and flexibility in draft position give the organization flexibility and tangible avenues for improvement. The young talent on the roster, along with the fifth pick, a second round selection, and salary cap space, provide significant opportunity to enhance the team this offseason and in the future. Langdon continues, I'm excited to get on the ground in Detroit and start preparation for the draft and our strategy beyond. See what he does. All right. What else do we got here? Is that it? I think that's it. That's pretty much all I want to talk about. Basically, the breaking news. Trajan Langdon is hired in officially. Out with Troy Weaver. Troy Weaver is fired. We're washing our hands with him clean. Yeah, I just want to kind of go over Troy's history with the Pistons on his way out. It's a mixed bag. I gave Troy a final grade of like a D plus C minus. But overall, he didn't get it done. And that's the issue that I have, is that it didn't look like there was any direction he was going with anything that he did. His biggest accomplishment is a couple big accomplishments I can say for Troy, which boosts up his grade to that D plus C minus. Is that one, he drafted Cade Cunningham. I mean, I guess you could be a dead brain imbecile to do that. You know, it didn't take a whole lot of brain power, but he did that. He didn't screw that up. His draft selections, I think, are not bad. Honestly, I do think Sadiq Bey and Isaiah Stewart were decent draft picks for where we got him at. What he did with them, though, is the issue. I don't think Killian Hayes was a bad draft pick in a weak draft. I don't think he was bad, but it's what he did with it that was what is just head scratching, right? So I'm not angry at Troy Weaver for his draft selections. I'm just irritated we didn't do anything with any of them, and it's my issue with him moving forward with them, and people are being like, well, I thought you were saying to keep him on and blah blah blah. No, I'm saying that you need to have like a bit of a transition period. You can't just fire the guy that's done all the scouting, that's done all the draft prep work 3 weeks before the draft. That doesn't make sense. And then on top of that, yeah, you just can't do that. You can't just do that. I'm trying to think of a world where that makes sense. And it doesn't. It doesn't make any sense. It only makes sense to the people that are just gung-ho about firing everybody. And I'm in that camp. I'm in the fire Troy Weaver camp. I've been firmly in it. But I'm also the guy that thinks realistically too. Like, hold on, you're firing him 3 weeks before the draft? Shouldn't you have fired him back in April? That doesn't make any sense. Then someone said, I was like, so you fired him 3 weeks before the draft? He's like, well, I prefer to fire him 6 months ago. I agree. You think that's a retort? I actually agree. I'm in the Fire Weaver camp. I'm also in the realistic camp, too. So, yeah. So, overall, Troy, he had a big job here to do. You know, it's cleaning up that roster in 2020 was not an easy task. So, I credit him for doing a lot of things right to get this roster in a situation where you can actually build on. And there is some foundation set there by Troy, believe it or not. And the salary cap is a big one. The draft picks are going to be the other big one. And knowing he didn't do much with Killian, Sadiq, and done a little bit with Stu, I do have major concerns that the rest of the draft picks are not going to be headed in an upward direction. And you can already start seeing it on the court already. Ivy taking a hit, Duran taking a hit. Asur is going to be coming up to his second season. If Troy was still around, I don't know if... Problem is, we don't even know if Monte is going to be still around. If he's still around, I don't know if Monte is really committed to developing anybody here. So you could still see Asur take a hit. You know? Just I don't have a problem with the players he picked. I have a problem with the direction he was taking those players. And it just doesn't seem like there's any plan for them. They're just floundering around. And if they turn out to be okay, cool. If they don't, then I guess we're cutting them. So, yeah. So, that's kind of a positive and a negative, more so on the negative side. And then the very big thing is getting out of the cap, the salary cap hell we put ourselves in. For what? 2 playoff appearances? 2 first-round sweeps? Just trash. So anyway, yeah, Troy wasn't getting it done. End of the day, even with me pulling some positives out of it, it's just not enough. You still gotta flip trades. He didn't really flip anybody. You still gotta. I would say that I will concede on a point. I do think that we could probably have signed somebody in free agency that's a decent player. I just don't like the fact that a lot of them are looking for long-term contracts on the mega deals. And I am glad that Troy didn't dip his hand into any of that. And then on top of that, a lot of you are not happy with him, but then you're trusting him to make moves like that. I don't even trust him to make moves like that. And you say I defend him. Bro, keep the money in your pocket. Don't spend a dime. Man, everybody's like, man, how'd you get bald, man? Watching Stan Van Gundy spend every single goddamn dollar. Pulling my hair out. So yeah, I don't know, man. I'm not mad about it, honestly. I do think he could have done a little more in free agency. All right, so I'll concede on that. I do think he could have done a little bit more, and gotten players on. They would have been expensive, but at least like a 2 or 3 year deal wouldn't have hurt. Okay, but I'm not sure what was out there, but a lot of players are getting the 4 to 5 year, and it's like, no, not for that guy. That guy, come on, man. Yeah, no bueno. Also his trades, man. That's the other thing really holding back this roster is his trades were a lot of lateral moves. So, and a lot of moves actually taking a step back in trades. And you can't do that. So, everybody, that was pretty much it. Just kind of want to talk about Troy Weaver. Probably my last discussion on him, honestly. I'm kind of glad that we're moving on from him a little bit faster than I really wanted to move on from him. One thing I will say is this is kind of the trajectory I was hoping we'd do. I was hoping we'd fire Monte Williams today. That's the news that should have been dropped today, is firing Monte Williams. I will say that keeping Troy Weaver on through the summer would have been a better idea. You get to keep around the drafting, the scouting, everything that he's put together, his inputs on it since he's been looking at this damn draft for the last 4 months. The fact that I don't think he's made bad selections in any of the drafts, really, it's really the development of the players that I have issues with, which is not drafting, it's development. And it'd been nice for him and Trajan to work together to get us a solid pick in a draft where you really need to do your scouting to see what guy is actually going to be a decent player. It's not the obvious, oh, Cade Cunningham, duh. Or, oh, Jaden Ivey at 5th, duh. You actually have to put your homework into this draft to really find out if you're going to get a quality player or not. And now you got a team in there that's going to pretty much go in with 3 weeks of preparation, which doesn't make me all that excited. So it'd have been nice to keep on. It would have nice to have been able to keep on Troy Weaver through the summer, and then once we got somebody in line in September, August, after we've done interviews, then we start the transition of moving on from Troy Weaver. But then you still got to think about hiring a coach, which goes back to my original point. Is like, so does this mean we're sticking with Monte Williams? Are they really going to do a coaching search and a GM search in the same summer? Is that even possible? To do one effectively? It's possible. Anything's possible. You can put together anything if you really wanted to. Does it make sense? Do you have enough time? Yeah, I don't know, man. It raises some red flags for me. Because it honestly leans to the direction of saying that Monte Williams may be your coach moving forward, which I don't think is a great idea. I don't under his watch, I haven't really seen anybody really develop. Won 15 games last year? 14 games last year? And then you can throw my direction and say like, well, half the team was a G League roster. Yeah, but we were also. It still doesn't. It still doesn't matter if they're a G League roster or not. We shouldn't have ended the season with that many wins. And then I can count on my hand. At least I can count on my hand. And I know if I actually went through the games one by one, but I can like literally count on my hand how many times this team went into late in the fourth playing competitive basketball and losing. And I know there's more than just 5. It was quite a few times. And you're telling me you can't pull out another 1 or 2 of those games? This team was a 14-win team, but they didn't get blown out every single game. There's more that the Pistons could have done this year. And that's not solely on Troy Weaver and not putting together a good roster. Obviously, that plays a factor. But this team shouldn't have been on the 14-win side of things. You also have a situation where at the beginning of the season where you're putting Killian Hayes in the starting lineup and Ivy on the bench. I don't know if anybody remembers that fiasco. That's not on Troy Weaver. It's on Troy Weaver for putting him on the same team. It's on Troy Weaver for putting the rotation together. It's Monte Williams. So, I don't know, man. I'm not too comfortable with Monte Williams moving forward. And that's not me saying he's a bad coach. I think some people misinterpreted that when I said that. I don't think he wants to be here. And I think it's really evident by just his attitude, just his demeanor. Again, Killian for Ivy, it doesn't make any sense. And then Ivy hasn't seen a whole lot of development. He shows signs that he could be a solid player, maybe even a star player. But he even seems like he's behind the 8 ball now. We'll see how far he actually is this upcoming season. This season is really going to determine his future here with the Pistons. Because if he puts up another mediocre year, yeah, writing's going to be on the wall. And then if it's Monte again that's a part of this roster, and then you're scratching your head, what happened to Ivy? I can't figure it out. Yeah, not comfortable about that. So, I don't know. It all goes back to Troy Weaver being fired so hastily. I just think that it actually sets the tone for the remainder of this front office and the remainder of this of the coaching staff, because I don't think the coaching staff is going to be fired right away. And they still got the 2024 draft where doesn't feel like we're all prepared for it. So I don't know. We'll see what happens coming up. The draft is going to be in 3 weeks. I do appreciate everybody joining this live stream. I will try to do more of these live streams. I got to do a better job at prepping it. I think I got it pretty much all down now. I just got to do some more tweaks. And it should be like perfect. So, and then I had to start it late because I was doing a bunch of adjustments. Me just dusting off the cobwebs of this thing, this whole setup. I used to do these more often, several years back, but just me getting into the groove of everything. It's gonna take a second, but it's starting to get back into game form. You know, feeling good. Do my stretches. All right, guys. I'm out of here. Appreciate everybody coming on and commenting and viewing. This is all I had to say about Troy Weaver. You probably won't hear me say anything else about it unless this next GM is just absolute trash, and I'm gonna be like, yeah, Troy Weaver wouldn't have done that. All right, y'all. I'm out of here.